The morning began like any other. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, sunlight filtering weakly through half-drawn curtains. Evelyn sat at the small oak table, her favorite mug warming her hands as she scrolled through her phone, a quiet ritual that helped her start the day. Birthdays, recipes, smiling families. Nothing unusual. Until her thumb stopped mid-swipe. Her breath caught. The photo was unmistakable. Her daughter, Lily, dressed in white. A long, lace wedding gown that shimmered even through the screen. Her brown hair was swept up in curls, her smile radiant, her eyes shining with a happiness that felt like a stranger's. Beside her stood a man Evelyn didn't know. A tuxedo, a hand around Lily's waist. The caption below read, "Congratulations to the beautiful couple, Lily and Matt. A perfect day." Evelyn's heart thudded once, then seemed to stop. The room suddenly felt smaller. She blinked, convinced she was mistaken, that it was a photo shoot, or a prank, or maybe a cousin's wedding. But no. Lily's dress was her grandmother's, the same one Evelyn had carefully preserved years ago, wrapped in linen and tucked away in the attic. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered against the floor. The screen still glowed, Lily's smile frozen mid-laugh. Evelyn stared at it for a long moment, then sank back into her chair. Her coffee had gone cold. Rain began to tap softly against the window, hesitant at first, then steadier. The rhythm filled the silence that stretched around her. She could hear the refrigerator hum, the clock tick. Small sounds, too normal for a moment, so unreal. She scrolled again, hands trembling. Dozens of comments, hearts, emojis, words of joy. Everyone seemed to have known. Everyone but her. Her throat tightened. She opened her messages. No missed calls, no texts. Just a clean, quiet screen. Evelyn whispered to the empty kitchen, "You got married, baby? Without me." Her voice cracked on the last word. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far away. Inside, she sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table, her phone still glowing beside the coffee cup. And in that small, quiet kitchen, something inside her cracked. Not loud, not dramatic, just a clean, breaking silence that would never sound the same again. The next morning, the house felt heavier, as if even the walls had learned the news and didn't know what to say. Evelyn moved through the kitchen on instinct, setting a single plate on the table, cracking one egg into a pan, pouring coffee for one. The sound of sizzling filled the silence that had stretched through the night. She sat down and stared at the plate. One forkful, then none. The egg cooled, untouched, a film of silence settling over everything. Across from her, the second chair sat empty, the same one Lily used to claim every Sunday morning. Back then, laughter and stories filled the room. Now, there was only the faint hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the clock that always seemed too loud when no one spoke. Evelyn's gaze wandered to the flowers on the counter. White lilies, wilted at the edges. They had been a gift from a neighbor a week ago, just because. She had promised herself she'd replace them before they browned. Now she couldn't bring herself to. Somehow, they felt like an honest reflection of everything. Once bright, now fading. She opened her phone again, half hoping it had all changed overnight. But the photos were still there. The comments had doubled. "You both look stunning. What a beautiful ceremony." Even her church friend, Mrs. Daniels, had written a blessing beneath the post. Evelyn's stomach tightened. Everyone knew. Everyone except her. Her mind replayed moments like scenes from a movie she couldn't turn off. Lily at her high school prom, spinning in that blue dress. Lily sitting cross-legged on her bed, talking about college dreams. Lily calling from the dorm just to say she missed her cooking. Each memory now hurt in a way she couldn't describe, as if each one had been rewritten without her in it. She reached for her phone, scrolled to Lily's number, and hovered over the call button. Her thumb hesitated. What would she even say? "Why didn't you tell me? Did I do something wrong?" The questions tangled together, choking her. Instead, she set the phone face down on the table. The sound of it hitting the wood echoed in the quiet kitchen. Her breakfast had gone cold. The flowers hung their heads. And the table, once a place of laughter and warmth, now felt like a memorial to everything she'd already lost but hadn't yet buried. By the third day, Silence had turned into something heavier. Not just quiet, but absence with weight. Evelyn sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over her daughter's name. The screen glowed soft blue against the dim room. She had rehearsed what to say 100 times. I saw the photos, sweetheart. I just want to understand. Her chest tightened. Finally, she pressed call. 1 ring. 2. Then voicemail. Hey, this is Lily. Leave a message. Her daughter's voice, bright, cheerful, recorded months ago, felt like a cruel echo. Evelyn opened her mouth, but no words came. She hung up before the beep. She tried again. Same result. The call ended in the same chirpy recording. The quiet that followed was unbearable. Evelyn set the phone on her lap and stared at the screen. Maybe Lily was busy. Maybe her phone had died. Maybe she was on her honeymoon. Excuses rose like small, desperate lifeboats she kept clinging to. Hours passed. The sun drifted across the floorboards. Still nothing. Finally, as twilight settled in, her phone buzzed. Her heart jumped. A message. Hey Mom. Sorry I didn't pick up. It was a small thing, really. We just wanted something simple. No big deal. Evelyn read the words again and again. No big deal. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She typed. I would have liked to be there. Then deleted it. Typed again. I didn't even know you were seeing someone. Deleted that too. She started to write a dozen different replies, but none of them felt right. How do you respond to being erased? The typing bubbles appeared, 3 dots flickering, then vanished. Gone. Evelyn stared at the screen until it dimmed, her reflection faint in the black glass. Behind her, the house stood still, every shadow stretching longer as the light faded. In that dimness, the truth began to settle in. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight or a rushed ceremony. It was a choice. Her daughter had built a life, and left her out of the picture on purpose. Evelyn placed the phone face down beside her and whispered to no one, then maybe it's time I stop waiting for a call that's never coming. 2 weeks passed before Evelyn could make herself drive to the house. It sat on the edge of town, a quiet street lined with trimmed lawns and mailboxes painted in cheerful colors. When she first bought it, she'd imagined it as Lily's new beginning, a place where love would grow, where family would visit, where Sunday dinners would return. Now, it looked nothing like the dream she'd once held. The grass had grown too high, the porch paint was chipped, and the mailbox leaned slightly, as if tired of waiting for good news. Evelyn parked at the curb and sat for a moment, staring through the windshield, hands tight on the steering wheel. Finally, she stepped out. The key, her key, still fit perfectly. The door creaked open, releasing a stale, heavy air that smelled of dust and old paint. The echo of her footsteps filled the empty living room. There were traces of life everywhere, a forgotten mug on the counter, a shoe near the door, a grocery list pinned to the fridge with a magnet that read Home Sweet Home. The irony burned. In the living room, she found a single framed photo on a low shelf, Lily and her husband, smiling at what must have been an engagement party. Evelyn touched the frame lightly, brushing away a thin layer of dust. She didn't remember being invited to that moment either. The blinds were half drawn, slicing sunlight into thin stripes across the floor. Dust floated in the beams like slow-moving ghosts. Evelyn walked through each room, the kitchen she'd helped paint pale yellow, the bedroom she'd once filled with furniture she couldn't afford but bought anyway because every girl deserves a good start. Now it all sat hollow, stripped of laughter, stripped of purpose. In the corner of the kitchen, she found a small stack of unopened envelopes, bills, a property notice, her own name printed clearly on each. That's when it hit her. The house was still legally hers. Every wall, every tile, every unpaid bill. For a long moment, she just stood there, the papers trembling in her hands. Then something inside her shifted, not anger exactly, but clarity. This house wasn't a shrine to what she'd lost. It was proof of what she had built. And maybe, she thought quietly, it was time to take it back. Sleep had become a stranger. Every night, Evelyn lay awake staring at the ceiling, the silence pressing down like a weight. She had spent her whole life doing things out of love, saving, sacrificing, hoping. But lately, all that love had nowhere left to go. The house haunted her thoughts. Each room she'd walked through replayed in her mind like unfinished business. She remembered the laughter she'd imagined filling it, the family dinners that never happened, the phone calls that never came. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a monument to disappointment. On the seventh night, somewhere between midnight and dawn, Evelyn sat up. Her heart felt strangely still, not angry, not broken, just clear. She reached for her notebook on the nightstand and wrote 3 simple words across a clean page. Sell the house. The next morning, she made coffee, sat at the same kitchen table where her heartbreak had begun, and opened her phone. Her thumb hovered over the number of the realtor she once used for a client at work. Her hand didn't tremble this time. She pressed call. Good morning, this is Carla. Hi, Carla. This is Evelyn Thompson. I'd like to list a property. Her voice was calm, steady, like reading from a script she'd rehearsed her entire life but only now understood. They arranged a meeting for later that week. When the day came, Evelyn dressed neatly. Soft blue blouse, pressed slacks, hair tied back. She walked through the house one last time before the realtor arrived. The air was cool and still. Light spilled through the blinds, landing on the walls she'd painted, the floor she'd mopped 100 times. Carla arrived, clipboard in hand. Are you sure about this? She asked gently. Evelyn nodded. Yes. It's time. When the papers were placed before her, she clicked the pen open, a sharp, satisfying sound in the quiet room. The first signature came easily. So did the second. Outside, the "For Sale" sign went up. Evelyn stood by the window, watching her reflection flicker faintly in the glass. Older, wiser, freer. For the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. The kind that comes not from holding on, but from finally, mercifully, letting go. The rain started just after sunset, soft at first, then heavier, sweeping across the windows in wild, uneven strokes. Evelyn sat on the couch, a book open in her lap that she hadn't turned a page of in an hour. The house felt lighter now, almost empty, but not lonely. There was a strange peace in the quiet hum of the storm. Then her phone rang. For a second, she didn't move. The screen lit up with a name she hadn't seen in weeks. Lily. Her chest tightened. She let it ring twice before answering. Mom. Lily's voice was sharp, quick, trembling at the edges. Is it true? Did you sell the house? Evelyn's gaze drifted toward the window. A flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by the low rumble of thunder. Yes, she said softly. There was a pause, filled with the sound of static and rain. Then Lily's words came like broken glass. How could you? That was my home. Matt and I were going to come back, eventually. You had no right. Evelyn closed her eyes. No right, she repeated gently. I bought that house for you, Lily. I paid every bill, signed every paper. And when you stopped calling, when you built a life without me, I thought you'd moved on. On the other end, silence. The only sound was the steady drum of rain on the roof. That's not fair, Lily finally said, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. You don't understand. Evelyn took a slow breath. Maybe I don't, but I do understand that sometimes, keeping a door open only lets the wind in. Another flash of lightning lit up the room. Evelyn saw her reflection in the window. Calm, firm, older. The person looking back wasn't the same woman who cried over a wedding photo. I have to go, Lily said suddenly, her tone brittle. We'll talk later. The call ended mid-sentence. The phone screen dimmed, leaving only the reflection of rain streaking the glass. Evelyn set it down on the table, the faint echo of her daughter's voice still hanging in the air. Outside, thunder rolled farther away, softer now. Inside, Evelyn exhaled, steady and quiet, the sound of someone finally learning that peace doesn't always follow love. Sometimes, it follows letting go. The day of the move dawned cool and pale, the skies streaked with a quiet pink that looked almost like forgiveness. Evelyn stood in the middle of the empty living room, surrounded by cardboard boxes labeled kitchen, books, memories. The echo of her footsteps filled the bare space. No furniture, no photographs, no laughter clinging to the walls anymore. She ran her hand along the doorway one last time, tracing the faint marks where Lily's height had been measured years ago. Each line carried a date, a memory, a moment that had once meant everything. For a brief second, she almost reached for her phone to take a picture, but she didn't. Some things, she decided, were better left as they were. Outside, the moving truck rumbled softly, waiting. The air smelled of rain-soaked earth and new beginnings. Evelyn locked the door, turned the key twice, and slipped it into an envelope addressed to the realtor. Then, without looking back, she walked down the path and climbed into the truck beside the driver. The ride to the lake was quiet. Fields blurred past, roads curved through small towns, and sunlight slowly broke through scattered clouds. When they finally turned onto the narrow gravel road leading to her new home, Evelyn felt a flutter of nerves, and something else she hadn't felt in months: anticipation. The cottage was small but bright, sitting close enough to the water that she could hear the soft slap of waves against the shore. The paint was faded, the porch creaked, and the kitchen was barely big enough for one, but to her, it felt like a blank page. By afternoon, she had unpacked just enough to make coffee and sit on the porch steps. The lake shimmered gold under the setting sun. Across the narrow lane, a man in his 70s waved from his yard. "You must be the new neighbor," he called with a grin. "Name's Walker. I fix things, mostly old radios, sometimes hearts." Evelyn smiled for the first time in a long while. "I'm Evelyn. I'm just learning how to fix myself." He chuckled softly. "Good place for it. The lake's got a way of helping people start over." And as the first stars appeared above the water, Evelyn believed he just might be right. Spring arrived gently by the lake, the kind of mornings where mist rose like breath over the water and the world smelled new. Evelyn stood barefoot on the porch, coffee in hand, watching sunlight touch the earth she now called home. The ground beside the porch had once been dry and forgotten, just a patch of stubborn weeds and rocks. Today it was her beginning. She pulled on her gardening gloves and knelt in the soil. The earth was cool and soft beneath her fingers, crumbling easily as if it, too, wanted a second chance. She planted marigolds first, bright, bold, unapologetic. Then lavender for calm, daisies for joy, and a small rosebush she'd bought at the local nursery. "For love," the woman at the counter had said. Evelyn smiled at the memory. Maybe love didn't have to mean pain anymore. Hours passed without her noticing. The rhythmic sounds of digging, watering, and trimming became a quiet meditation. A breeze rustled through the pines, carrying the scent of lake water and new beginnings. For the first time in months, her thoughts didn't wander to Lily or the past. They stayed here, in the warmth of the sun, the hum of life returning. Later that afternoon, Mr. Walker appeared at the fence, his hands tucked into his overalls. "Well, look at that," he said with a grin. "You're building yourself a whole new world out there." Evelyn laughed softly. "Trying to," she said, brushing dirt from her knees. "I used to think I needed other people to feel rooted. Turns out, I just needed good soil." He nodded approvingly. "That's wisdom right there." As days turned into weeks, her garden bloomed. Bees buzzed lazily between flowers, and the air filled with color and scent. Neighbors would wave when they passed, sometimes stopping to talk. Evelyn started hosting small morning coffees on her porch. A handful of people, shared stories, shared laughter. One morning, as dew glistened on the petals and the sun climbed higher, she realized she hadn't thought about the old house in days. The ache that once shadowed her heart had softened into something lighter, something like gratitude. She stood back, wiping her hands on her apron, and smiled. Her garden had grown, and so, finally, had she. It was a warm afternoon when Evelyn heard the soft knock at her door. She was in the garden, pruning her roses, the air rich with the scent of lavender and earth. The knock came again, hesitant, almost uncertain. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the porch, her heart steady, though a small tremor of old memories stirred beneath the calm. When she opened the door, time seemed to fold in on itself. There stood Lily, her daughter, her hair pulled back, her eyes tired and unsure. In her arms, she held a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. The sight hit Evelyn like sunlight after rain, sudden, blinding, beautiful, and bittersweet. "Hi, Mom," Lily said softly. Her voice was smaller than Evelyn remembered. Can we come in? Evelyn hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. Of course. Inside, the cottage smelled of fresh coffee and blooming flowers. Lily looked around, her gaze lingering on the framed photo of the lake, the small shelves of books, the vase of wildflowers on the table. It's beautiful here, she whispered. Evelyn nodded. It's peaceful. They sat across from each other, the baby cooing softly between them. Evelyn reached out, brushing a tiny hand with her fingertip. What's her name? Grace, Lily said. She's 3 months. Grace, Evelyn repeated, smiling faintly. A good name. Silence settled between them, thick but not cruel. Finally, Lily spoke. I should have told you, Mom. About the wedding. About everything. I was scared you'd be disappointed. Her voice cracked. And then it just got easier not to call. Evelyn looked at her daughter, the same eyes, the same nervous hands, and felt a wave of something she hadn't expected. Compassion. You were young, she said gently. We both made mistakes. Lily's eyes filled. I miss you. Evelyn smiled softly, reaching across the table to touch her hand. I miss you too. But some things take time to heal, Lily. And I've learned to let things grow at their own pace. The baby stirred, making a small sound that broke the stillness. Evelyn looked down at her granddaughter and felt warmth bloom in her chest. When Lily stood to leave, Evelyn walked her to the door. The sunlight spilled across the porch as she said, Come by again sometime. The door stayed half open long after they'd gone, not wide, not closed, just enough to let love find its way back in, when it was ready. Evening came softly over the lake, the sky brushed in shades of gold and rose. Evelyn sat on her porch, a cup of tea warming her hands, the gentle hum of cicadas filling the air. The garden before her glowed under the fading sun. Marigolds, roses, lavender, all in full bloom, each one planted by her own hands. She looked out over the still water and saw her reflection ripple, not distorted, but alive. The woman staring back wasn't the one who had stared helplessly at wedding photos on a phone screen months ago. That woman had been hollowed by loss. This one had been rebuilt by peace. The sale of the house, once the most painful decision of her life, now felt like a quiet act of mercy. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just a door closed so another could open. She had thought she was letting go of her daughter, but what she had really let go of was the version of herself that lived only for others. A soft breeze carried the scent of her flowers and the sound of water lapping gently against the shore. She smiled, thinking of Lily's visit, of the baby's small hand curling around her finger. There was still distance, still unspoken words, but love no longer hurt. It simply existed, like the steady rhythm of the waves. Mr. Walker's radio hummed faintly from across the lane, an old jazz tune crackling through the evening air. He waved from his porch, and Evelyn lifted her mug in return. The companionship of small kindnesses, neighbors, laughter, the quiet rhythm of ordinary days, had become enough. She set her cup down and walked barefoot into the garden, letting the soil press against her feet. Every bloom here had grown from something she once thought was gone. Every color whispered that beginnings often come disguised as endings. As the last light dipped below the horizon, Evelyn whispered to the twilight, I sold that house, but it was never just a house. It was the weight I carried. The wind moved softly through the flowers, almost like an answer. She smiled. Calm, certain, whole. Final line. Sometimes, the greatest freedom doesn't come from what you gain, but from what you finally let go.